Good evening and thanks for joining us. The winds are slowing, but the water is still rising. The rains from what was Hurricane Florence are flooding the eastern portions of North and South Carolina. Mandatory evacuation orders were issued this afternoon for those living within a mile of the Cape Fear and Little Rivers. At least 5 people have died and at least 1 million are still without power. Rescuers are using boats to bring people to safety. North Carolina's governor pleaded with residents not to return to their homes and to prepare for more damage and destruction.
Rivers will rise days after the rain has stopped. In the east, they will crest Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Remember, most storm deaths occur from drowning in fresh water, often in cars. Don't drive across standing or moving water.
The storm is now forecast to move slowly across South Carolina, where many rivers are projected to break record flood levels. Joining us now via Skype is South Carolina ETV reporter Gavin Jackson. Gavin, tell me where you are and what you've seen today so far.
Hey, Hari, I'm in Georgetown County. I'm in an armory down here. We're about 40 miles south of Myrtle Beach, where we've seen a lot of the big impacts from the storm in South Carolina have been on the coast here. Myrtle Beach did get a lot of tropical storm force winds yesterday. We did see a lot of debris. I did see some trees on power lines yesterday. It's just been a little bit of rain today, not too much wind. A lot of that rain is moving inland right now, and officials are telling us that we should expect 8 to 12 more inches of rain across the state for the next couple of days. So they're really worried about inland flooding at this point, and they're keeping their eyes on a couple waterways that typically flood in these situations.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what kind of impacts it's having when it comes to those smaller creeks and those rivers that are starting to swell up, and they might not even crest until maybe Monday or Tuesday in some cases.
That's the thing. We've been driving over some of these bridges in the state, and they're looking pretty full right now. These waterways that we're driving over are looking pretty full, and those are only expected to get more and more flooded and swollen as the water comes down from North Carolina. And we've seen this in Hurricane Matthew in 2016. So officials know what to expect. They're already keeping their eyes on certain waterways, and they're telling citizens to kind of expect what they already know to happen. So people know where their flood-prone areas are, and they know that they should be looking out for those rising waters, because in a lot of places we're still under flash flood warnings. And the area I'm in, the area up in Myrtle Beach, is also still under evacuation order because they expect conditions to slowly deteriorate in some areas due to this flooding.
What's the challenge been for first responders as they try to get into some of these areas where there have been evacuation orders, but there are still people deciding to ride it out?
You know, Hari, I was riding around with the National Guard today. We traversed the Grand Strand, is what we call it, which includes Georgetown and Horry County, which includes Myrtle Beach. We went up and down the major highways, and we didn't see much damage or flooding at this stage. And we just heard from the governor's press conference that they haven't had to do any water rescues at this point. Sadly, the only fatality we've had in South Carolina was about 150 miles inland in Union County, where a woman last evening actually came across a tree on a roadway and got into an accident, and she died as a result of that. But other than that, a lot of South Carolinians have responded to these evacuation orders, and officials are crediting that to their lack of having any rescues in the state.
And what about the people who are in shelters, the ones who already took cover? Is the governor telling them to come back at any certain point?
I think it's becoming more of a local issue. A lot of other counties in the state have actually lifted their evacuation orders. They're still telling people not to come back necessarily until they know what situation is in certain areas. So I think it's kind of a play by ear in some of these situations, but the shelters have been open. There's plenty of room for people in the shelters. I can't remember the number off my head, but there are a couple thousand people in shelters across the state.
You know, in these kind of scenarios, usually utility companies have line workers ready to go and come back in to make sure that they can kind of clear the power lines, turn the lights back on, considering all the trees that might have been down. Are you seeing any of that yet?
All right, yesterday, actually, I was out in the wind and the rain with a Santee Cooper electric crew. That's a local electric cooperative here that covers the Myrtle Beach area. They were actually up in a bucket truck in 40, 50 mile an hour winds, chainsawing a tree off of these power lines, these high voltage lines. And they were doing it like no sweat, which is really remarkable for the rest of us to watch. But I was also inland in Florence, the city of Florence, the county of Florence, ironically enough, and they are actually staging 2,000 linemen there from Florida. And that's just a small fraction of the 20,000 linemen I've been told that are on call in response for the storm in both Carolinas.
And the military vehicles we see behind you, well, what's the role of any military resources in this?
So like I said earlier today, I was up in Conway, and that's an area that's prone to flooding. They have the Waccamaw River right there. It's also close to the Lumber River, which flooded during Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and it actually flooded out the town of Nichols. So they've been positioning high water vehicles across the coast and also inland for this emergency situation when it comes to flooding with
Yep.
these rivers that they know are going to flood. So these high water vehicles, just in case of any rescues, which haven't happened yet.
All right, South Carolina ETV reporter Gavin Jackson joining us via Skype. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ari.